You're about to experience a message from here at South Lake Church where we
engage, grow, and share.
So make sure to subscribe below and keep watching together as we engage, grow, share Jesus in our community relationships. Well, again, my name is Pastor Rob Bailey here at South Lake Church, and we're gathering together as we start a new series on the heart of God. Working through the 10 Commandments, the most exciting thing you can talk about in the Bible, right? Right? Yeah. No, there's a reason why we're chuckling and laughing right now. And as South Lake is a Lutheran church, and how we read the Bible and understand it, we see it in two kinds of lenses. There's law and gospel. When we say the word gospel, we're talking about both the books that talk about the life of Jesus, but also the good news that he died for you and for me. That's the gospel. What about the thing we're chuckling about? The law. When we say the law, what do we think of? What comes to mind?
Thou shalt not.
Thou shalt nots. So those are very positive statements, very negative. Police, nothing like seeing those lights right behind you. Does anybody ever experience people throwing down law in their home?
Sorry, did I say that out loud?
Yes, we do. And so when we have the word law, typically, is there really a positive or exciting emotion that comes with it? No. For all the things you just described. Because mainly it shows you and tells you what you're not supposed to do. And as somebody who likes going as far as he can in boundaries, I don't break rules, I just bend them. There's a difference. Laws can be negative. But in the Bible, when we talk about the law of God, we're not just talking about thou shalt nots that are in there. When we talk about laws, we're not just talking about rules that make kosher or not. Law is the will of God. All things that happen, all things that go through, all time, all of that is God's will. And another way to call that, His law. So if that is God's will, His purpose for all things, is it always negative? No. And the goal these next 10 weeks is to see how we see God's law working through our lives to help us share the good news, the gospel. So let's take a look at that. So we're going through the 10 Commandments. And as was brought up, what's most known about the 10 Commandments is the fact that they almost all start with, thou shalt not. Does anyone remember what the one that doesn't? Yeah, there we go. And then remember the Sabbath day, but that's normally the one, that's the first positive one, really the only one. Honor your parents. And remember the Sabbath, and somebody might be preaching on that. And with that, then what does that mean for us? Why do we look at the 10 Commandments? Well, first we need to understand is when we talk about the law, and then when Jesus talks about the law, even if you talk to a Jewish person today, the law covers 613 commandments. Yeah, everybody's looking really excited, like, I don't remember that. Yeah, there's a lot of law, commandments, to be part of God's people as far as the Jewish culture. But we as Christians love focusing on 10 of them. And if you grew up in a Baptist background, a non-denominational background, and you're visiting us, you're watching with us, you probably noticed I said today we're talking about the first commandment. But for you, when you read the reading today, went, wait a second, that's the first and second commandment. So I need to talk about this. As Lutherans, Catholics, Orthodox, we have one way of ordering the 10 Commandments. Baptists, Methodists, many American Christians have a different way of ordering the commandments. So as we work through this together, you feel like the numbers are off. That's because us as Christians can't get along in how we number them. If you think that's controversial, wait for this. So how do we break it up? For the Lutherans, the first commandment is, thou shalt have no other gods, which includes then, thou shalt not have any engraven images. You should not worship anything that isn't God that's created. One commandment. But our brothers and sisters, again, you might have grew up with hearing the first commandment was, thou shalt not have other gods, and the second commandment being, thou shalt not have engraven images. Well, wait, if those are off, how do they reline up? Well, for us, the last two commandments, the 9th and 10th, go, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's house. Followed by the 10th commandment, thou shalt not covet your neighbor's house, his maidservant, his manservant, his ox, his donkey, and anything that belongs to him. Well, our brothers and sisters, who are, again, of the Baptist and non-denominational background, they just say, don't covet. They sum it up. Well, in my opinion, if you look at both sides, there's really only 9 commandments. That's a better way of looking at it. No gods, don't covet. Sums it up pretty nicely. But then why do we still say 10? Let's dive into this now. This is from Exodus chapter 20. This is Moses speaking to God's people. This is Charlton Heston helping the people out of Egypt. And the scary part is soon I won't be able to make that comment. It's called the 10 Commandments for those who haven't seen it. And as Moses is talking, God shares with them his commandments to be with them. And for us as Christians, when we think of the 10 Commandments, what do we always think first? Thou shalt now have no other gods. But that's not how the 10 Commandments start. You might have noticed it. I am the Lord your God, who rescued you from the land of Egypt, the place of your slavery. Does that sound like a law, what I just read? I just shared with you guys, right? The law, gospel, the whole rules of God, gospel, God saves us of Jesus. I am the God who rescued you from the land of Egypt, the place of your slavery. Does that sound like law? Sounds like gospel. The 10 Commandments start with God making a point, I saved you. I loved you so much, I got you out of there. Therefore, as my people who are saved, thou shalt not, is when it begins. So when we talk about the 10 Commandments, it's important we don't forget this conversation starts first with a God who loves his people, who saved his people. And everything else then comes into place when we understand that point, that he loved you so much that he saved you. You must not have any other gods but me. You must not make yourself an idol of any kind of image, of anything of the heavens or on the earth or of the sea. You must not bow down to them. The first commandment calls out all sin, all brokenness, all the struggles in our lives. Thou shalt not have no other gods. Seems easy, right? But in practice, this is the hardest thing in our life. Because for us, even today, what kind of idols do we have in our lives right now? Money. Technology. Phone. Stuff. Juliet. Your family, yes. Your family can be an idol. Your children can be an idol. I don't know how many of us think our parents are idols. Oh, never mind. Anyway, but all of these things in our life are things that we want to be better, to succeed, right? Is it bad to want stuff? No. Is it bad to want good things for your children? Is it bad to want money? No, especially when you get 10%. We're always good there. So what's the problem? The problem is when your heart is dead set on those things. You want those things so much that you will sacrifice anything for that to happen. When it comes to money, you might do things at your job to help get ahead. You might sacrifice time with your family to get more money. That is an idol. You might want your kids on the top-rated travel team. You might have to play a little politics. You might have to miss a whole bunch of weekends so they can be on that team. You sacrifice for things. But here's the tougher question. Why God brings this up is, are those truly the idol you worship? Are your children or money? Think about that for a second. Why do you want your kids to succeed so badly? Why do you want money so badly? Why do you want your stuff so much? Who do you really are worshiping? Who are you really hoping will be happy with those things? Yes. What happens is your own heart is focused on yourself. And seeing your kids fail, you want to say because you love them, you're sad. But deep down it's because you feel like you failed as a parent. Not getting that paycheck, not getting that extension. Let's face it, being let go feels like your identity is no longer a part of what that was. The reason why God points out to Moses and then to all the people, is when it comes to the law, we love to put ourselves, our heart, before God, before all things. But somebody who is loved and saved by God, your identity and who you are His. You're His creation and He loves you. And how you act and do things in life start with, are you thinking about yourself? Are you thinking about, I am somebody God made and created? Which is why then that long list of things He says, don't worship. Because guess what they are? They're creation. Just like you. We all are. The one thing to bow down, to worship, to love is God. Why? Because He rescued you, He saved you, and He loved you. Which then goes into our next reading right here. This is with Jesus. This is what's known as the Beatitudes, the Sermon on the Mount. Jesus is teaching His disciples what does it mean to be a follower. And I can tell you, as much as we laughed at the 613 commandments, what Jesus says in chapters 5, 6, and 7 in Matthew are much harder to live out and cut and hurt more than anything anybody could ever say. But we picked in this passage here because Jesus makes a point why we're even talking about this. Don't misunderstand why I've come. I did not come to abolish the law of Moses or the writings of the prophet. No, I came to accomplish their purpose. I tell you the truth, until heaven and earth disappear, not even the smallest detail of God's will disappear until His purpose is achieved. We as Christians get this mixed up all the time. The people listening to Jesus at that time on that hill had the same mistake. They heard Jesus preach and thought, wow, here's a new teacher. We don't have to worry about that old stuff. We can just be together, love one another. Life's great. But Jesus makes a point. I'm not here to say that all that old stuff is no good. Forget about it. But He does something else. What He doesn't say is, I'm also here to keep telling you what Moses kept teaching. I'm not here to repeat the 10 Commandments either. I'm here to fulfill it. As I brought up and we shared about where our hearts typically go, it goes towards ourselves. And as much as we think, Lord, I love you, I'm going to put you first, within a moment's notice, it all goes back about me. What Jesus is saying here, I will be the one that will be the one to fulfill and put God first. I'm the one to have that and take that on. That is not a burden of yours to wrestle, how do I put God first? Because I'm the one to fulfill it and make it happen. So if you ignore the least of the commandments and teach others to do the same, you will be called the least in the kingdom of heaven. Oofta. What Jesus is saying here, what I just shared, is that he's warning us, don't take what was said beforehand and just throw it away or make a point it doesn't matter. When we do that, we don't realize, again, the law is God's will. Everything that we do in life is God working through it. And Jesus make a point, don't forget that. But anyone who obeys God's laws and teaches them will be called great in the kingdom of heaven, which is what we're doing right now. We're talking about this, sharing this. But then here comes verse 20, and this is the hard verse. But I warn you, unless your righteousness is better than the righteousness of the teachers of the religious law and the Pharisees, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Does that sound exciting? No, right? Because you're kind of like, how do we do this? Well, who's Jesus talking to? His disciples. Their righteousness. Are they any better than us? No. And I'm smiling because I can look at Jim right now. He's thinking of Peter and all the dumb things Peter says, and he's like, yeah, I can relate to almost every verse. So what is Jesus talking about here? Well, he's making a point that his disciples, what they do in their lives, sharing the good news, who does that power come from? Yeah, from Jesus, from God. That's the point of all this. The only way to be a part of the kingdom of heaven, the only way to be a part of all of this, is not that you figure out how these laws work. You're the one to be able to put God first, but instead realizing the only person that can overcome all these things is through God, their teacher. We have a God that loved us so much, who knew the struggles that we are dealing with daily, that you're feeling right now, that he came down to be with us, to live out these laws that we fail at daily. And that hurt and that burden you're feeling, he took that on the cross. And by suffering, taking on that burden, he died for you, for me, so that we can have a relationship with God in heaven. It's not about figuring it out. It's about realizing that he did that for you. At Southlake, we engage, grow, and share Jesus in our community relationships. At the end of the day, to sum up Southlake, we're about relationships with Jesus. It's about love. As you leave here today, as you look forward, what does this all mean? To sum up the 10 Commandments, to sum out everything that we're working through, one word: love. Jesus, on the night he was betrayed, shared with his disciples, I give you one commandment. That's it. Love as I have loved you. For they, the world, will know you are my disciples because you love one another. Now, it's easy to say, go love. But what does that mean? And as we work through these next couple weeks, we're going to see that what that love means is to love God with all your heart, soul, and mind, but also love your neighbor as yourself. That is what it means to love. And if you're sitting here going, thanks, Pastor, How do I love God with all my heart, soul, and mind? How do I love my neighbor? Well, guess what? There are 10 commandments that work on different ways that focus on a love of God and a love of each other. But that journey starts with realizing where your heart and mind need to be fixed on. It's not on yourself, but on Him. And who do we need to help us do that so we can love others? Jesus. And that is good news worth sharing and experiencing with one another as we go through this together. Amen? Thank you so much for taking time to experience a message here at Southlake. If you have time, make sure to subscribe right over here, but also check out other videos that are down right over here. Again, the Lord bless you this week, and thank you for checking out Southlake Church, where we
engage, grow, and share.